Seafood adds delicious variety to meals and is a superb source of protein. That's why fish and shellfish are important reproducible natural resources. But due to overfishing, environmental change, and other factors, many seafood species are in decline. All over the world, this is causing conflicts between fishers competing for a shrinking catch. What can be done to conserve fisheries resources and enable genuinely sustainable fisheries? This program presents a case study of successful fisheries management in Japan. We will highlight the responsibilities and measures taken by fishers, public administrators, and fisheries research organizations, or FROs. Ise Bay is the largest bay in Japan in terms of surface area. The shore of Ise Bay spans two prefectures, Aichi and Mie. The bay supports a rich coastal fishery. For Aichi Prefecture's fishing vessels, silego, flounder, and shrimp have been the main catches. In addition to fishing from boats, Mie Prefecture also uses various forms of aquaculture to produce red sea bream, yellowtail, laver, and so on. One fish species inhabiting Ise Bay is the Japanese sand lance. They grow to around 8 centimeters within a year, then spawn. This species exhibits a characteristic behavior called estivation. When the water temperature is above 18 degrees Celsius, they bury themselves in the sand and become dormant. In Aichi and Mie prefectures, there are 200 sandlands fishing fleets made up of 800 vessels belonging to 20 fisheries cooperative associations. Today, sandlands fishing is done by groups of 3 or 4 vessels. 2 boats pull a net. The sandlands are hauled in. Then a third boat transports the catch back to the fishing port. The sandlands fishing is done in several areas of Japan, but Ise Bay accounts for about 10% of the total national catch. The value of the annual catch is around $16 million. There are 3 sandlands fishing seasons. In January and February, after the fish have spawned, adults are fished. Adult sandlands are processed into food like tsukudani. From March, fishing for whitebait sandlands begins. Around 90% of the cash value of the fishery comes from whitebait sandlands. Chirimen, boiled and dried whitebait sandlands, is an Ise Bay delicacy consumed all around Japan. From April to May, immature sandlands with a body length of more than 60 millimeters are fished. Because they have fine scales, they are prized as a fish feed in aquaculture operations. Mie Prefecture's fishers have traditionally caught all 3 sizes of sandlands: adults, whitebait, and immature. Meanwhile, Aichi Prefecture fishers have historically focused on catching mainly whitebait. In the early 1960s, conflict between the fishers of Aichi and Mie Prefectures began to mount. In 1963, fishers from both sides of Ise Bay organized a conference to decide what day to open the whitebait sandlands fishing season. Aichi fishers insisted on making the starting day as early as possible, the Mie fishers as late as possible.
もう喧嘩ばっかだった。じゃあ愛知は愛知で話まとめていくわ。昔の考え方だもんで、三重県は三重県で自分たちの腹があるわ。ゾ付け屋が自分のったもん。バカだれくさい野郎で。
The 1960s were a period of great change for the sandlands fishery. Bigger vessels with bigger nets and high-efficiency echo sounds appeared. In 1968, boat seine fishing for adult sandlands was permitted. They had previously been fished with scoop nets. The catch exploded from 9,000 tons in 1960 to 24,000 tons by 1968, a growth of 150%. But stock depletion from overfishing had already begun in the Ise Bay Sandlands fishery.
親イカナゴがですね、夏眠から冷めて、ですぐに、割と短期間の間に産卵するわけなんですけれども、その夏眠から明けて、産卵するまでの間にもう大量に、漁師の方が取っておったんですね。
自分らもそういうことしたことはよく分かっとるわけやで。なあ、もうそんな寝込むとこまで取りに行ってはさ、来年の親まで取ってしまうねやで。それはあかんわな。
In 1974, the Sandlands catch hit a peak of 28,000 tons. But by 1978, it had plunged to 3,000 tons. Fisheries research organizations began full-scale studies of the Sandland resources. Previously, they had collected only the tonnage of catches for use as data. Now they began sampling the sandlands landed to calculate the number of fish. By sampling the catch per boat per fishing day, a stock size is estimated. FROs were able to estimate the stock size at the start of the fishing season. There was no question that the adult sandlands population in Ise Bay had decreased due to overfishing. The FROs and public administrators decided to delay the start of the fishing season for adult sandlands. It was moved from November 1st to December 1st to protect spawning adults. But by 1979, the stock had not recovered. The FROs explained the situation to the fishers and recommended a moratorium on fishing for whitebait and immature sandlands.
やっぱりなかなかそんな受けられんわな。それは自分ら漁業者の意見するや。あんたらの意見聞くけど、思ったらあかんだらお前ちゃんとしてくれるわと、そんな意見まで出てきたな昔は。
The fishers decided to go out and fish, but the catch was so bad they were only able to do so for one day. It was at this point that the fishers began to cooperate with the FROs in test fishing and in providing status reports on fishing and the ocean.
みんなが真剣に取り組むようになったの、これから。それでそういう悪いことも出会ってみらんとみんなが分かんない、気がつけん。
By cooperating with the studies, the fishers enabled the FROs to collect more data, boosting the accuracy of their stock abundance estimates. The opening of the fishing season for adult sandlands was revised again. Fishing for adults was prohibited until it could be confirmed that spawning had occurred. But the following year, the whitebait sandlands recruitment number remained low. The fishers of both prefectures had no choice but to impose a moratorium on fishing for whitebait and immature sandlands. The stock was slow to recover, and the moratorium lasted 3 years.
その 3年でも漁師もよっぽど度胸がいったわで。3年目の時はなんか当たり前に魚が酩酊しても「まあ1年やん据え置いてやめらめ」ってそこまでせんと回復しやへんじゃないかということで。
In 1983, the whitebait sandlands fishery reopened after 4 years. The catch rebounded to the 10,000-ton mark for the first time in 7 years. Subsequently, a number of new fisheries management policies were created. Optimal size for whitebait sandlands in open-season fisheries was established.
When the size hits 35 millimeters, that's the optimal time in economic terms. So the target is 35 millimeters. But based on the stock, when it's down, we say, let's wait for them to get a little bigger this year. So there's variation, but 35 millimeters is what we're aiming for.
This allowed a stable catch of both whitebait and immature sandlands to be secured. In addition, a target was set for the population of adult sandlands to be left unfished. This was to secure a stable catch in the following year.
Starting with such and such billion adults, what should the recruitment number be? We plot those points on a graph and draw a curve. There's a peak at around 2 billion. Then, even if the number of adults increases, the number of additional fish doesn't change much. That's what the data indicate.
Knowing the size of population to leave untouched for the following year made it possible to determine the closing date of the fishing season. These decisions were facilitated by public administrators.
行政としましては、資源管理に関する予算の確保など、研究環境を整備することで、行政サービスの一環として水産試験場の取り組みをサポートしています。
イカナゴ漁に従事する漁業者をはじめとした関係漁業者間での円滑な協議により取り組み内容が決定されますよう、周辺環境の整備を行っています。
By instituting comprehensive fisheries management measures to tackle declining catches, a stable commercial sandlands fishery was secured. Even though there are years when stocks are low, this status no longer persists year after year. The fishers of Aichi and Mie prefectures, FROs and government authorities established a resource management plan for the sandlands fishery. They have continued to follow this plan.
そうそれは年によってはこれはありますね。まあまあ大体取れてますわ。やっぱりそれはやっぱり資源はやっぱり守ったら人間が守ったらなあかんちゃうのこれは。
徹底してやらんにゃできへんな。みんなが協力して徹底してやらんにゃ。なかなか根気いいこと誰がやるの。
Fishers themselves manage Ise-Bay's sandlands fishery. Collaboration with FROs and public administrators make this possible. In commercial fishing, conflicts between the interested parties are frequent. The key to success is to have all parties understand each other's positions and establish cooperative relationships. Ongoing fisheries management that protects fish reproduction can carry fishing and its long traditions into the future. Now let's review the Sandlands Resource Management Plan as we follow the sequence of research studies and fishing seasons that unfolded during 2008 to 2009. Point 1 of the management plan is to protect the estivation grounds. After the end of the fishing season in May, when the water temperature rises and the sandlands go into estivation from June through November, a conservation area is established. The fish can sleep without being disturbed. During estivation from June to November, research on the distribution and maturation of estivating sandlands are conducted. This is done by means of test fishing called karatsuri. In sandlands estivation grounds, hooked poles are lowered to the seabed and slowly dragged along for 5 to 10 minutes. Sandlands buried in the sand are caught on the hooks. This is carried out in several locations to estimate the population density of the estivating Japanese sandlands. In this particular year, not many sandlands were caught in these tests, raising fears of an insufficient adult stock. FROs study the body length, weight, stomach contents, and gonads of the sandlands. They also extract otoliths from the head and examine it under a microscope to determine the age of the sand lance. From December through January, the maturity of the sand lance that have completed estivation is surveyed. Based on examination of the gonads of sampled fish, a spawning forecast is made. Point 2 of the management plan is protecting spawning adults. In mid-January, the spawning situation is surveyed to determine the opening of the fishing season for adult sand lance. This test fishing is conducted at 2 locations at the mouth of the bay. On the same day, the abdomens of the sample caught are opened so that the fishers and FRO personnel can see whether eggs are present or not. Then a conference is held to determine when the fishing season will open. The fishing season will start when more than 90% of the sand lance have completed their spawning. But the spawning percentage of the samples collected on this day is below 80%. So there will be another study to determine the day fishing will start. In addition, the fishers who took part in the test fishing report that their catches were small. It's clear that there is a lack of adult sand lance. Point 3 of the management plan, setting the opening day for the whitebait sand lance fishery. Immediately after the larvae have hatched, research related to the opening of the fishing season begins. At the turn of the year, small nets are used to begin studying the distribution of larval and juvenile sand lance. Larval fish are collected from all across Ise Bay to make a detailed estimate of the stock. The FROs estimated the stock as of the beginning of 2009 at around 4 billion fish. This is about 20% of a typical year. In early February, 9 fishing vessels from each prefecture conduct small-scale test fishing. Data on stock density and state of growth is collected, and the length, stock, and optimal fishery opening day for the year are simulated. Based on the results, the FROs hold an information sharing session. The fishers of both prefectures, fish processors, and public administrators all gather to air their views. This year, because stocks are low, the discussion turns to delaying the opening of the fishing season. In late February, Aichi and Mie prefectures jointly conduct a large-scale test fishing. They are collecting data in order to decide on a target opening day. They fish for 4 hours, but the catches are small. After the test fishing, the parties split up, with the FROs and fishers of each prefecture meeting separately to discuss the opening day. Some of the sand lance caught this time are already larger than 40 millimeters. The Aichi fishers are worried that the fish will grow too large. They want to open the fishing at the earliest possible date. Afterward, the FROs conduct a detailed examination of the sample sand lance and collate data. Eventually, an appropriate time to start fishing can be estimated. In early March, the conference to decide the opening day of the whitebait sand lance fishery is held. Based on their data, the FRO representatives give a presentation on when the opening day should be. This serves as a launching point for the fishers' discussion. Now that scientific data are being used, there are fewer heated verbal exchanges than in the past. For this year, March 8th is decided on as the day to open the fishing season. At the meeting, other matters are discussed beside the opening day: operating procedures, marketing procedures, and more.
どういうことだよこれお前ちゃん。よい、ヤンシュマル。どうだよお前ちゃん。なんか意見言いなさい。どうだよ宝生丸。どういうことだこれ。サンプル取るよあくまでサンプル。3日前に話したことを我ら売っただね。
魚取ってこの生きていくっていう加減もあって。
今みんなが全体考えと。
だから昔は
ねじゃあとのことで若引っ張りってたら本当のサンプルが取れやんだよわ。
いけるかって言ったらこれはもう定かではない。
いやちょっと待ってさ、それについてはこの間お前ちの三重県の組合長から悪かったなということを俺が伺っとるで、それでチャレンジなさい今年の場合は。
The conference to decide the opening day is an important venue. Fishers hash out their opinions about their ideal commercial fishing community. Management of the Sandlands fishery in Ise Bay revolves around the fishers. When there is an inadequate stock, like this year, they understand that it will impact their own financial situations. They are keenly aware of the fishery's sustainability. On March 8th, the whitebait Sandlands fishery opens. At 4 a.m., from 20 fishing ports scattered through Aichi and Mie prefectures, 800 fishing vessels gather and head out to the fishing grounds in pursuit of whitebait Sandland schools. At sunrise, they commence fishing. Nets full of sandlance are hauled in. On the first day of fishing, the sandlance will command the highest price for the entire year. The transport boats rush back to port. This is because freshness greatly influences the price. The sandlance are landed immediately and brought to the auction floor where wholesale buyers wait. The size of catches is down this year, so the price commanded is higher than usual. The sandlance purchased at auction are immediately transferred to the processors, who boil and then sun-dry them. Each market gathers data on the number of vessels that went out and their catches. The information is sent to the FROs. Samples from the catches are measured for body length. This is combined with other data to calculate the number of fish caught on a daily basis. Each day, this figure is deducted from the initial stock estimation to determine how many sandlance remain uncaught. Point 4 of the management plan is deciding what day to close the fishing season. To ensure a sufficient stock of adult fish for the following year, the target day is when the remaining population of sandlance is 2 billion. Again, this day is decided through discussion. Whitebait sandlance fishing ends about 2 weeks after it starts, when the fish have exceeded 50 millimeters. Now the fishers will wait for the fish to grow to 60 millimeters. Fishing season for immature fish will begin. The targeted closing day is between April and May, when the stock is estimated to be 2 billion fish. In this way, even if the catches of the year are small, 2 billion fish are always left uncaught for the sake of the following year's fishing. Since 2001, a preserve where no fishing is allowed has been established, a Marine Preserve Area, or MPA. This ensures a stock of adult sandlance for the next year and protects just hatched larval fish. The location and extent of the preserve shifts based on the movements and distribution of the stock. We have seen the sequence of research and fishing seasons that make up the Sandlance Fishery Resource Management Plan. The Sandlands fishery of Ise Bay is subject to comprehensive fisheries management based on a resource management plan. Fishers do the fishing. The FROs do the studies. Public administrators establish an institutional structure. Collaboration between these three parties has made it possible to keep the commercial fishery stable and protect the stock of fish.